games, we are redefining and we're defining new cultural memes. So memes are ideas that permeate into our culture. And essentially we're shaping the lives of players, and as a result we are shaping the future of humanity. Now that sounds really scary, right? When you're just sitting there and you're wanting to make something awesome in your room, and you whip up something neat. But I think games are becoming so big, and even if you create one game and it has 100,000 downloads or something like that, every person who plays that game is going to be affected by the fact that they've played it. Maybe in a minute way, but they're still being affected, and that's sort of scary. And so I want to use a different definition to, which I think is a little bit more useful, and that is, meaningful games are games that improve the complexity of the individual. And I think this is important because it's not just focused on the domain of just games; it's domain agnostic. And so when you hear this, you're probably thinking, well, why is that important? Like, why should we even bother improving the complexity of someone? And well, for that, I'd like to say that as a species, we've had to evolve. Right, we had to evolve to adapt to different circumstances, and we had to survive natural selection, and we had to change, and we had to grow. And in order to do that, we need to become more complex. And I think in the world at the moment, we currently face all these problems. So we face problems in terms of global poverty, peace, happiness, human resources. There's heaps of problems, right? There's lots of things bad about the world. But I think if we can become more complex, we can be better equipped to deal with those problems. And not just deal with the problems, but prevent further problems from happening earlier. So it's in our interest to continue to complexify such that we can adapt to solve problems. But I think more importantly than that, by becoming more complex, we can live fuller lives, right? We can better understand our world and ourselves. And as a result, and this is where it gets into my personal views a bit, we can become complex enough to answer the question, what is the meaning of life? By becoming complex enough to create meaning from our own existence. And so when I say that, I'm essentially sort of inferring my belief, which is that there is no meaning to life. You have to create your own meaning. And I think if you're complex enough that you can do that, and you can live fuller lives. You can disagree, of course. I'm just putting a viewpoint out there. And so I think one of the best ways to improve sort of the complexity of someone is for them to sort of engage in an activity called flow, which hopefully many of you have heard of, or even maybe play the game by that game company, which is out on PSN, or it's on Flash. It's on the web. But anyway, flow is essentially an idea that's taken from the field of psychology, and it's essentially when someone is in a state of mind in which they are completely involved in what they are doing. They have high levels of concentration. They're in a state of sort of ecstasy, I suppose. They have great clarity about what they're doing. They feel what they're doing at the moment can be done, is doable. They have a serenity. There's timelessness, so when you're looking at something, you sort of lose track of time. And there's intrinsic motivation. That is, there's motivation for being there that's coming from yourself, not just from anything else like money or pressures from other people. What you're doing feels worthwhile. And so I'm sure many of you have probably been in a state of flow. This comes in other terms, in being in the zone or being in the groove of things. And so there are several conditions for flow. And I think these conditions really align with what games can provide. So to be in flow, you really have to have immediate and clear feedback on what you're working on and what you're doing. You have to have possible challenge, and so challenges that you can complete, it's feasible to complete. And you have to have a feeling of control. And so I've got a picture up here of sort of different states of challenge level and skill. And so when you have a high challenge level and a high level of skill, you're essentially in a state of flow. And I think flow can be a very useful tool in improving the complexity of individuals. And what do I think this? Well, because usually a lot of people say when they're in flow that they're contributing beyond themselves. They're doing something greater, and they're usually working in the most effective way. If you enjoy something and if you love doing it, you'll tend to be in flow when you get involved. But I think flow is just a tool, and it can be used in good and bad ways. So games can engage us in flow, and I think many good games do, but we need to sort of make sure that what we're doing when we're in flow and what we're sort of consuming is really worthwhile and what is, I suppose, meaningful in that sense. And it's my belief that there are different things to different individuals that are worthwhile in pursuing, but I think games can sort of teach us, teach us lessons that are worthwhile, and so games can teach us things that are worthwhile, and I think by definition all games have to teach us things, because in order to play a game and understand a game you have to learn rules, and when you learn rules in that game you then have to pass problems, because games are just a series of problems, and so the game has to teach you to solve those problems, and as a result all games teach. And so I think games teach in several different ways. So games teach through rules. So for example, when I play like a StarCraft, or when I play StarCraft, I might learn from those rules different sort of military styles and tactics. Or when I play Super Mario Brothers, I might learn that maybe it's good, not to like move too quickly through the world, or slow down, or a whole bunch of other things. You can also, games can also teach through representation. So what sort of the symbols on the screen and the things you interact with represent. And so you have a lot of, like, for example, Political Machine. I think Political Machine is a simulator of political systems in the States. And through representation and also rules, they teach you about the way politics works. And last of all is experiences. So by playing games, we are experiencing things. We're experiencing worlds. And through experiencing things, we learn. So I think a good example is a game that I really love, which is Heavy Rain. And Heavy Rain puts you in different positions that you wouldn't usually be faced with in real life. And then it asks you to make choices in those choices in those circumstances. And you can learn a lot about yourself through the choices that you make. And then, you can take that further by discussing it with other people and, contrasting with them what choices they made. And so, in short, about meaningful games extend the complexity of the individual by engaging them in flow, by teaching things that are worthwhile, and providing real rewards for doing so, which is the intrinsic motivations that you get when in flow. I'm not finished yet. I still want to talk about personal games. And so personal games are games in which personal beliefs are shared. And I think because personal games are really, I suppose, personal to the designer and the individual, there's not a great deal to say. But I think there are a few interesting things. And so that is, personal games are an extension of meaningful games. But I think they're meaningful from other reasons. So by sharing your personal beliefs in a personal game, players are becoming more complex by understanding different points of view. And the more varying points of view we understand about the world, the more complex we become, the more we understand. And so personal games are an opportunity to engage with the player at higher levels. However, these games can also be quite polarizing. And I've taken an example of a book in this case, well, sort of personal, but Twilight, which I'm sure you all heard of by Stephanie Meyer. So Twilight is essentially Stephanie Meyer, when writing Twilight, she reflects about her needs in adolescence, to be wanted and to be recognised, and a whole bunch of things. And as a result, a lot of younger teenage girls could project themselves onto that point of view, and they could engage with it, right? And so like that was really engaging to all those people, all those younger teen girls. However, at the same time, it also like turned a whole bunch of people away, right? Because they disagreed. They thought that those beliefs to be wanted